Hi, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Just waiting for another minute and then we'll get started. Thank you so much for joining us today and hanging out with us for the next hour and 15. We'll give it one more minute and then we'll get started. Hi, everyone. Thanks for those of you who have just joined. We're just going to get started in a minute. Okay, I think we should get started. It's 8:03 on the East Coast of the US on East Coast time. Welcome everybody. Thank you so much for spending some time with us today. I just wanted to say good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I know folks are joining from all over the globe, so thank you again for spending some time with us. My name is Yakuta Fatehi, and I'm from the William Davidson Institute at the University of Michigan. Our institute focuses on practical research to help businesses thrive in emerging markets. Please feel free to connect with me and the Institute on LinkedIn to learn more about our work. Now let's get into our show, right? So whether you're a clean cooking industry veteran or new to the field or not from this field at all, our goal is to give you the opportunity to hear from industry leaders about their innovative pilots focused on a variety of business functions such as sales, distribution, marketing, partnerships, and more in order to scale clean cooking solutions. So today we are joined by leaders from the Clean Cooking Alliance, who I'll refer to as CCA or the Alliance during our call, and three clean cooking companies. So we have BioLite, Burn Manufacturing, and KOKO Networks. Unfortunately, our speaker from Sistema.bio had to cancel at the last minute, and we couldn't find, she couldn't find somebody to step in for her. So we're sorry about that. And our speaker from Bern is having some technical troubles, but she will be joining shortly as well. Now, these innovators bring solutions ranging from advanced biomass stoves and electric cookers to biogas and ethanol options, working across Africa, India, and beyond. So just a bit of housekeeping. I'll be guiding this conversation, gently keeping time and fielding any questions. And I also just want to say thank you to all of those of you that sent questions in advance. We actually have tried to weave in responses to that. So please watch out for responses to your questions that you sent in. Our time together is going to so fly by because we're going to hear from our multiple speakers about company innovations and insights, including from CCA, who will take a larger view of the private sector response to scaling clean cooking solutions. So that will occur in our first round. We'll have a first round of questions that are focused on the innovation itself. And then we'll focus a second round of discussion on what are the challenges and solutions to overcoming barriers in order to implement innovations. And then finally, we'll have a short Q&A at the end. So each speaker will speak for about maybe 5 to 6 minutes or so, and before they pass on the mic in each round. So let me just set up a little bit of context so that our panelists can jump right into their innovations. 2.3 billion, yeah, that's billion with a B. So 2.3 billion people worldwide still lack clean cooking. So it's a massive challenge. It affects the health of primarily women and children who are responsible for cooking, who are in the household when cooking occurs, who are responsible for collecting firewood or other sort of biomass. So the massive challenge affects the health of primarily women and children and the environment, and negatively impacts household economic opportunity, as collecting firewood and cooking on inefficient stoves is time consuming. Scaling clean cooking in the furthermost reaches of sub-Saharan Africa and the globe is complex. And while it sits under SDG 7, it is a cross-cutting issue. You can find lots of really amazing resources on the Alliance's website if you would like to dig deeper into this. Our panelists are tackling the complexity with approaches that aim to address some of the most persistent barriers hindering wider adoption among households, including poor affordability, cultural preferences, difficult logistics, and lack of awareness of the benefits of clean cooking. The private sector is vital in driving innovation and scaling clean cooking solutions. This is such an important channel that the Alliance has a dedicated venture catalyst activity under its market strengthening program that focuses on company scaling and organizational capacity building. Today, all three of our companies partner with the Alliance, who are present on the call. Through the Venture Catalyst, the Alliance supports businesses in solidifying their commercial viability, enhancing their investment readiness, and facilitating access to growth capital. So I just want to say with a big thank you and a big welcome to Ethan, Meredith, Sophie, and Simba. And let's get started with round one. And please do, to my speakers and panelists, please introduce yourself and your company as well as you get started with your response. So we'll begin with BioLite and with Ethan. Ethan, could you please share one innovative strategy you've applied to scale operations, especially as you move into new markets in West Africa, such as innovations in marketing or partnerships? Yeah, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Yakuta, and thanks to all of you for spending time with us today. I'm Ethan. I'm the managing director of emerging markets at BioLite, a role I've held for the last 13 years. I've worked on clean cook stove distribution and adoption now for a couple of decades, first helping to run a distribution business in rural Maharashtra in India. I then wrote my doctoral dissertation on why that business that I worked on sucked. And then I have spent the last 12 or 13 years running a clean cooking and clean energy business more holistically, focused on households in sub-Saharan Africa. BioLite designs and manufactures cooking, charging, and lighting products for off-grid households across sub-Saharan Africa. We've now delivered clean energy access to 8 million people across the continent, and we've mitigated a little over 2 million tons of carbon, mostly through our clean cook stoves. We work exclusively through a B2B partnership model, wherein we invest heavily in our distributors to be successful in last mile distribution, financing, and after sales service. So we don't own the customer relationships directly. Rather, we're focused on technology, innovation, manufacturing, supply chain, and then supporting our distributors. We work across over 20 countries in sub-Saharan Africa through this partnership model. And in the clean cooking category, our product line includes ultra clean and efficient biomass and charcoal cook stoves. Our approach is really to meet users where they are in terms of locally available fuels and cooking practices and methods. Cooking is deeply cultural, and it's really hard to drive changes, behavioral changes in the type of fuel used and the stove type, et cetera. So happy to dig into that, like anthropological point more if folks are interested. We have a unique go-to-market strategy for cooking, which really leverages our work on solar home systems. What I mean by that is we're the largest specialized manufacturer of solar home systems in sub-Saharan Africa. And so we have a wide base of distribution channels that we can then cross-sell cook stoves to. It's very often the same customers who lack electricity at home who are also cooking on smoky open fires. So that's primarily our go-to-market approach. And the specific example I'll come to either now or in a follow-up question relates to that. And we use carbon credits to subsidize the end user retail price of our stoves in order to widen adoption as much as possible. I'm just going to touch to Yakuta's question specifically around the marketing activities that we've been doing in West Africa. West Africa is interesting for cooking because unlike Kenya, where clean cook stoves are quite widely known and adopted, that's not the case or has not historically been the case in much of West Africa. So we had our work cut out for us to build demand not only for BioLite stoves, but for the category of clean cooking in general. In West Africa, we have an exclusive partnership covering a handful of our markets with a channel called Baobab Plus, which is one of the largest solar pay-as-you-go financing companies in the region. And they also run a microfinance bank across their markets. And so we're able to finance products both through the PayGo channel as well as through the microfinance channel. And so with the generous support of the Clean Cooking Alliance through the Venture Catalyst program that Yakuta mentioned, BioLite and Baobab partnered to build awareness for clean cook stoves, meaning for the category, as well as awareness for the BioLite specific products. And so we worked on this campaign with Baobab in 4 of their markets, in Senegal, in Nigeria, in Cote d'Ivoire, and Madagascar, which I know is not in West Africa, but it's still Francophone. Yeah, as I noted, like in Kenya, we really just need to build what's called secondary demand, meaning demand for the specific brand, like for BioLite stoves. But in West Africa, we need to build primary demand for clean cooking as a category. And so either now or when there's more time, I can talk through more about the specific marketing innovations that we undertook to try to drive demand in this new market in these new markets for clean cook stoves. I'll pause there, Yakuta, unless I have more time.
Yeah, you have more time. Please go ahead,
Oh,
Ethan. I think
okay,
it's really
perfect.
interesting. Yeah.
Okay, cool. So with Baobab Plus, we invested in a blend of above the line and below the line marketing activities. So, for example, we put up billboards. We had radio ad campaigns. We worked with social media influencers, for instance, cooking influencers, folks who shared recipes, who recommended cooking products, who gave tips on how to keep your home beautiful. They did unboxing videos and ran giveaway campaigns. And the above the line campaigns were really focused on highlighting the benefits of cook stoves or clean cook stoves as a category. In other words, we focused on how these stoves reduce smoke, how these stoves can keep your living environment and your cooking environment healthy, how they can accommodate large pots for big families, how they drive fuel savings. And then below the line, we worked with third-party marketing companies who had marketing activators doing road shows and market storms, dances, and videos in villages, all to build awareness around our specific partnership with Baobab Plus and our specific stoves. They worked alongside the Baobab Plus sales agents who demonstrated cook stoves. Demos are super important for stoves. Like seeing a billboard is not good enough. Stoves really require clients to see how it cooks local dishes before they're willing to purchase a stove. So it really is a touch, feel, play around with type product category, unlike even solar lighting, which can kind of sell itself in above the line marketing ways. Maybe I'll pause there again in the interest of time, but then I can also talk through, if folks have questions, our sales model, what was successful, both around the marketing campaigns and about our the business itself. Thanks, Yakuta.
Thanks, Ethan. Yeah, let's hear from Sophie next, and then if we have more time, we definitely will come back to you, Ethan. So Sophie, I'd like to now put you on the hot seat. Could you share innovations in product market fit as you pilot operations in rural areas, which are so much more trickier than expanding into, say, a new urban market, right? And mainly because of, we know of issues of, lower population density, there's free access to firewood and other biomass fuels. There's lower consumer awareness, and of course, just lower household income, right? So if you could chat a little bit about that, I think folks are really interested in distribution, the possibility of distribution in rural areas and product market fit there.
Okay, thank you, Yakita. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. So as Yakita said, I'm Sophia Dupoy. I'm Group Head of Public Affairs at KOKO Networks. And KOKO Networks is the world's first bioethanol for cooking company that we have developed a solution based on ethanol that enables households to transition from using charcoal and biomass. And as you rightfully said, some of the challenges that are faced include affordability and access. And KOKO has managed to bring together technology and carbon finance to be able to make a solution that is affordable. And in terms of access, our ethanol, we use KOKO points, which are ATMs that we install in shops near where our customers live, and they're able to refill using a reusable canister that is pretty close outside their doorstep, very close to where they live. To date, we have reached about 1.25 million households across Kenya, and we are definitely looking at launching into Rwanda soon and more broadly outside of that. We have been in this region for 10 years, since 2014, but we launched in Kenya around 2019. Now, in terms of addressing your question, our solution is very focused around high population density areas. When you think about our KOKO point, the ATM, the fuel capacity inside is around 300 liters, which means that those KOKO points more often than not are refilled daily using micro tankers. Now, that works very well for households where they can easily access the KOKO points, and essentially they're able to do this daily. Now, when you start thinking about rural, and I think everyone knows that majority of the populations live in the rural areas where there's predominant use of biomass and primarily firewood. And as you said, the population density is lower. Now, increasingly, we are seeing that the firewood that was previously free is no longer free because the level of deforestation across countries in sub-Saharan Africa and even other regions across the world, the degree of deforestation is increasing. And as much as we have people at the forefront of saying, let's stop the deforestation, let us plant trees, we know the pace at which you're growing trees cannot make up for the pace at which you're cutting down the trees. So we have discovered in our conversations and engagements with people in rural areas that young girls, who are often the ones charged with collecting firewood, have to walk longer and longer distances, which increases the risks of them encountering wild animals or facing harassment. So in essence, in as much as, yes, they may end up collecting firewood, it will cost them 3 hours, 5 hours just to do that exercise, and then they have to come and go through the process of lighting. So that is increasingly becoming a challenge. And when we did our test, we tested in a region called Siaya, which has one of the lowest tree covers in Kenya. When we tested, the response was extremely good in the sense that mothers found comfort in that they no longer have to worry about sending their young girls out into the unknown. The young girls can now focus on, you wake up in the morning, you light our KOKO stove, you're able to cook within a matter of minutes. and the girl is able to go to school. We will have to, we are in the early stages of relooking at our hardware, because as I said, it makes sense for high population density areas. We have to factor in the long distances and the fact that most people come to the marketplace once a week. Yeah. So given that our canister right now has a capacity of 2.3 liters and could last a family of 4 for about a week, depending, as I said, depending also on what they're cooking, we'll have to adapt to that. We'll have to look for ways that we adapt to the fact that these people come to the marketplace once a week. We can't, we cannot have them adapt to us. And this is something we learned during 5 years of R&D. You adapt to how people cook, to how they live. You don't suddenly bring in something that is radically different and force customers to adapt. That is usually a recipe for failure. So we were supported, just like Ethan said, we were supported by CCA, and I'm sure Simba will speak to this. They supported us as we did that pilot. And the lessons we've taken are going to inform exactly what we are going to do as we seek to expand. We are getting to the stage now, we are expanding into peri-urban, and we will definitely be looking at expanding into the rural areas within the next 1 or 2 years. Thank you, Akita.
Great. Thank you, Sophie. So, I'm trying to pull out threads from what you and Ethan said, and it's absolutely, it's adapting to the context. And it's like Ethan said, in West Africa, it's, focusing on first even creating demand for clean cooking. And like you said, Sophie, is in rural areas, it's understanding what are the challenges that they face, and then how do we take our product and fit it to their needs. So Simba, I'd love to bring you into the conversation now. So for those of you who have just joined, we're having some technical difficulties with our speaker from Burn Manufacturing. That's Meredith. I'm hoping she will be able to join soon. And unfortunately, our speaker from Sistema.bio had to drop out and couldn't find a replacement. So Simba, I'd love to, in fact, maybe if you could even bring in some of the material that Sistema.bio was going to cover around carbon financing, if you could also touch upon that. But I think, if you could share more about the market strengthening program and the venture catalyst program and the support you provide them, and how you spur innovation amongst these companies and build the capacity for them to take this on. Yeah, we'd love to hear a bigger, broader view of how you can scale the support to multiple companies, and then also if you can touch on carbon finance, because that's a really hot topic. We got a lot of comments and questions around that, and unfortunately, Sistema.bio, who was supposed to speak about that, is not with us today.
Cool, thanks, Yakuta, thanks. And great to be here, everybody. And always a pleasure to be amongst friends, Ethan and Sophie and others who are working so hard in this sector. So where to start? I think the great thing about clean cooking, there's veterans like Ethan who've been around for a long time, but even in the last 4 or 5 years that I've been involved in the clean cooking space, so much is changing, and the conversations that we're having about clean cooking are changing in terms of the tone and in terms of the content. Clean cooking used to be looked at as very much a sector where quite unsexy, nothing was really happening. There wasn't a lot of innovation. There weren't business models that were investable. That was what people used to tell us, that they weren't investable business models. And it was really not very interesting to a lot of people 10, 15 years ago. And I think it's great to be able to sit here today and say that's changed, and it's changed for the better. So there are a lot of companies in different parts of the sector working on different technologies, working with different fuels that are trying different things. But it's all really based on how do you get the best solution for the customer, and how do you scale up that solution? Because the North Star is really what we care about, what we exist for at CCA is universal access. So we exist so that we don't have to exist maybe in the future, where everybody, the 2.3 billion people that Yakuta mentioned, have got access to an affordable, clean and reliable source of clean cooking. And it's really great to be able to support in this part of the CCA that I sit at, I should actually introduce myself. So my name is Simba Mdimba. I work out of Southern Africa. I'm based in South Africa. And I sit in a part of the Clean Cooking Alliance called the Market Strengthening Team. And we basically interface with the private sector and with investors and with other stakeholders and participants that are looking at clean cooking from the business side of things, really trying to understand solutions, commercial solutions to scaling up, to really solving the problem of clean cooking. So in the iterations of the type of work we do, the companies that Ethan, the projects that Ethan and Sophie have referred to were part of what we call the Venture Catalyst program. And that was a sector-wide technical assistance program that was really focused at providing proof points that there are really interesting things happening in the clean cooking sector and providing ways for investors and other stakeholders to look at clean cooking from a different lens. We're a donor-funded organization, so we go out and raise money and then apply that money in different ways that we can really show what's happening in the sector. So some of those things are grants, technical assistance, and other ways that we leverage the grant money, the money that we have to be able to support companies. In the Venture Catalyst program, we worked with over 30 companies in different sectors, doing in a whole array of different projects in different parts of sub-Saharan Africa using different technologies. I think, broadly speaking, there's some really interesting levers, things that are changing in the sector. So one of the things, leveraging of what Ethan was saying, one of the things that we're seeing more of and want to see even more of is actors from adjacent sectors, or maybe specialist actors like distributors who've already got a footprint, whether that's be in solar home systems or in other aspects of last mile distribution, looking at clean cooking as a way to expand their footprint, expand their product portfolio, and be able to offer more solutions to the customers that they already have. And the good thing about players that come from adjacent sectors is very often they know their customers really well. They know they know the price points that they can sell at. They understand the customer's pain points. They have infrastructure that allows them to distribute to the last mile where it's sometimes very difficult to get to. They have payment platforms in many cases where they have ability to add pay-as-you-go optionality and business models onto existing products. So we're looking to see more of that sort of partnerships where existing players, maybe original equipment manufacturers in the clean cooking sector, can leverage the distribution pathways and the reach and breadth of companies in adjacent sectors or specialist distributors in the way that Ethan has described. And that's really exciting for us to see more of that happening in the sector. The second point, I think, is what Sophie touched on, is how we create solutions that don't leave anyone behind, because in a lot of the parts of sub-Saharan Africa that we work in, and in other parts of the world as well, we know that the rural customer is the hardest one to serve because of all the things that you've already mentioned, low population densities, not good infrastructure, the ability to pay, the perceived freeness of alternative fuels like wood, although I think from the perspective of, at a macro perspective, it's not free because of, charcoal and the environmental degradation that comes with firewood and rampant charcoal use is not free for any of us from an environmental point of view. But those are the kind of the challenges that companies at the coalface have to really deal with. And we continue to look to ways to support that and help companies to come up with solutions, to pilot new things, pilot new ways of working, business model innovation, technology innovation, all of those things that come really into solving the problem. So as we go forward, we are doubling down on all this type of work. I'll just mention, I'll go back to the carbon point of view, but we recently launched what's known as the User Insights Lab, which will really be looking at supporting companies looking at user centricity of their solutions. So moving away from just talking about affordability and the old way of thinking about things, but really focusing on what do the customers want? Can the customers really be advocates of the product so that they sell themselves? Can we have solutions that really talk to the customers where they are and how they work, how they cook, how they live, and really integrate all of these solutions into robust thinking around user centricity? So that's something we're really doubling down on, and the User Insights Lab is launched now and is a program that CCA is investing in. We're also to your point, Yakuta, really looking at how the carbon markets are changing the face of clean cooking generally, and how we can play a role in making sure that the carbon markets work for the sector in the right way. Dealing with some of the integrity issues that I think some of you'll be aware of in terms of questions that have been asked about the quality and the integrity of clean cooking carbon credits, and really making sure that we can hold the sector to account, and also offer a pathway for carbon finance to do what it's supposed to do, which is to offer alternative ways for companies to provide products to their customers in ways that the customers can afford, and in ways that the customers can continue to use. So our view is that carbon markets are very important to how clean cooking will expand, how clean cooking will roll out, how we expand access, but we have to do it in the right way. And we'll continue to support that, both in terms of helping the companies at the coalface, helping project developers who are not necessarily always clean cooking companies, but other enterprises that are coming into the sector specifically to develop carbon projects, and also helping financiers look at ways that they can support carbon project developers, either through pre-financing of carbon project activity, or being at the back end of actually buying, the impact, buying the carbon assets that companies like BioLite and KOKO are developing. So yeah, there's a lot there, but I think the crux of it is that the sector is changing at a really rapid pace. There's a lot of really cool, interesting work happening both in business model innovation and also in the technology innovation that's allowing clean cooking to be delivered to more customers in more affordable and sustainable ways. And we at Market Strengthening and as CCA are continuing to develop our programs in ways to boost and support the companies that are at the coalface.
Great, thank you for that, Simba. So because Meredith is not here, and I think she's continuing to have technical issues, I just checked in with her. Before we move into the second round on what are the challenges to actually designing and implementing innovations, I wonder if any of you, all of you, could speak to something that Burn Manufacturing was going to talk about, is the focus on advanced cook stoves, which are in the space of electric cook stoves, and also talk a little bit about consumer financing innovations. So Ethan, I know you touched upon pay-as-you-go. Sophie, you touched upon, okay, we need to find solutions that fit rural households. If you could speak a little bit about either electric cookers and electric cooking, and building in sensors to enable pay-as-you-go, as well as anything around consumer financing and innovations in consumer financing. Because as Simba rightly pointed out, right, the focus is now being brought on the customer and on the problem then that they face, not only in cooking with clean solutions and fuels, but also accessing them and changing their mindset to including clean cooking in their stove and fuel stack.
Sure, Yakuta. I'm happy to start there. I guess with a bit of a provocation, which is to say that I would love for sub-Saharan Africa to be cooking on electric, and I don't think it's happening anytime soon for a bunch of reasons. Starting with the point that I made before, which is cooking is deeply cultural, and driving changes in cooking practices is really tricky. In fact, as an investor of an electric pressure cooker company told me, he called it a knife fight getting customers to switch to electricity. And the reasons for that are infrastructural and cost. Grids are unreliable on the continent. The cost of electricity is very expensive and isn't currently subsidized. And there's a behavior change piece, as I mentioned. And so BioLite's in a really interesting spot. Like, we have all of the engineering expertise to be a leader in electric cooking, and we're sitting on the sidelines right now until the product market fit has been further validated. So I I hope Meredith can make it on in this call to share the counterpoint. And I hope BioLite is not selling biomass cook stoves a decade from now, and that we're in electric. But I just think we've got a lot of work to do to drive behavior change and to build the requisite infrastructure between here and there. I'll just make one point about financing, which builds on what Simba was saying about carbon credits. It took me a long time to acknowledge this, but or to accept this, but I've come to realize that carbon is really the only unlock for cooking. That, like, absent carbon subsidies, clean cooking is a really hard business to run. The unit economics are just really tricky. Willingness to pay is low, manufacturing costs are high, yada yada. And there's a bit of a threat right now, at least in terms of voluntary markets, in that the bottom has fallen out of the market from a price per ton standpoint, and there's a lot of pushback on carbon markets. Some of it is totally justified, some of which I think is an overreach. But I do think that, like, if carbon markets were to disappear, and this is a provocation, but I don't think cook stove businesses will be scalable. So we really need functioning and robust carbon markets with predictable long-term pricing for the stove sector to be viable and scalable. And I think that's the crux innovation and financing. Like, we can talk, and I'm happy to talk about how solar home systems get bundled with stoves, and the solar home system is collateral for the stoves. But, like, at its core, for cook stoves to be viable, carbon markets need to be viable.
Okay, from my side, I will not say much on electric cooking. I think that's not an area that we're quite knowledgeable about. But when you're talking about consumer financing, that is something we also do not do. We believe in customers paying for a solution. And that is why we seek to make it as affordable as possible. I mean, our 2-burner cook stove goes for $10. And that is thanks to carbon markets. And that is why we are very keen to scale as fast as we can and get the cook stoves into the hands of the consumers, and then work on developing, getting the local supply of ethanol up and running, because the sustainability of ethanol for cooking in any country is heavily dependent on local supply. So as much as in the early stages, there will be a lot of imports, the ambition is to eventually make each country be self-sufficient in supply of ethanol. And when we subsidize using carbon, we subsidize both the cook stove and the ethanol. But the ambition is to work with governments to see how we can get them to incentivize large-scale producers to come in, and that way we get economies of scale and are able to get really low-priced ethanol, similar to what you get in Brazil, US, and now India. So that is definitely something that we talk to governments keenly when we are seeking to expand. Now, talking about carbon markets, and I think that is an area that everybody is keenly watching, and I echo what Ethan has said. Clean cooking has only managed to accelerate uptake due to carbon markets, and that is why we need to maximize the time period that we are able to get good prices. Right now, the market is very unpredictable. I think rather than really going up, it's proving to go in the opposite direction. But part of it is just about the fact that we are not able to get alignment on Article 6. I think we keep going to Conference of Parties every year, and we keep seeing like we're getting towards an agreement, and then it doesn't happen. And then at the same time, countries are having to develop their own policies. And we are increasingly discovering that countries are approaching carbon markets and carbon credits and carbon revenue just as they would any other industry, any other sector. And we're discovering to our dismay that when they approach it that way, without involvement of investors, more often than not, they get it wrong. And you find that investors such as ourselves are the ones that suffer. So instead of being able to look at a long-term viability of your business and how to make sure that you're present, we are having to spend time chasing governments and making sure that we are having a discussion with them as they develop their carbon policy, as they develop their carbon regulation. So it is a never-ending conversation with government. But the good thing is we are finding that they're having to listen to us because as countries start looking at burning charcoal, the cutting down of trees for charcoal, they have to make sure that they have a solution waiting in the wings. And the only way, as we said, we'll have these solutions waiting in the wings is if the investment, what they're offering to investors is attractive. So even as we look at expanding beyond Kenya and Rwanda into other countries, we are carrying the same narrative. We need all hands on deck. We need all solutions if we are to stay true to the 1.5 dream. And if we are to enable the 2.6 billion households, the 2.6 billion people that you spoke to, if we are to enable them transition and overcome all the negative effects of using dirty cooking fuels.
Yeah, no, thank you for that. And I think it's a great segue into the second round of our discussions, right? Which is to understand what are the barriers to implementing innovations, to implementing pilots that want to test out innovations. How do you manage integrity of the pilots? So if you could maybe start with that, Ethan, is what are some of the key barriers you face in implementing and testing innovations, and what are solutions to some of them, those challenges? And then, yeah, I think if there's time, we'd also love to hear about the outcomes of the innovative product the project you mentioned. Yeah.
Cool. Thanks, Yakuta. I'll cover a few areas. I'll highlight a regulatory obstacle, an organizational obstacle, and then a cultural obstacle. So the regulatory obstacle is in many of the markets in which BioLite is working. There are extortive taxes and tariffs on clean cook stoves. And as I mentioned at the beginning, the unit economics, or a few minutes ago, the unit economics already are so challenged for cook stoves. In Kenya, for instance, we pay 35% duty and 16% VAT on our stoves. So I'm oversimplifying, but it increases the price to end users by 50-odd%. And that's unfortunately the case in a lot of the markets we work in. By comparison, actually, for solar, the sector's done a good job in eliminating a lot of the regulatory obstacles, and it's helped to unlock scale in a lot of markets. Yeah, and I'd love, as I tell the Clean Cooking Alliance at every opportunity, for CCA to prioritize the regulatory environment, because I think it's so critical to unlocking the sector. At the organizational level, selling cook stoves through solar channels requires a lot of organizational change by our partners. So I'll just give a couple quick examples. Solar products sell well at night. And the reason is when it's dark out and you flip the switch on, it's a compelling offering. If you flip the switch on a solar light during the day, like, you can barely tell that it's on. While demonstrating stoves works a lot better at daytime. Similarly, lighting, a demonstration, you just push a button, whereas a stove demonstration can take 30 minutes or an hour, to the point we mentioned about needing to demonstrate that you can cook a range of local dishes. And then it's just hard from a strategic focus standpoint across a solar organization to convince them to prioritize a new product category. Like, sales agents know how to sell solar. They earn a nice commission on it. Why bother learning how to sell this new bulky thing to carry that you're going to earn less margin on. So there's a lot of institutional change required with our partners to similar, and I'll shut up in a minute, but similarly, solar home systems are locked. So from an inventory standpoint, you can ship solar home systems to agents in the furthest flung corners of the country without being concerned that they're going to disappear because they're locked. Whereas that's not the case for locked because of the pay-as-you-go platform on the product. But that's not the case for stoves. You could just take it out of the box and use it. And then, yeah, finally, and can get into this more if there's interest, cooking is so deeply cultural that, like, as we're doing pilots, we're really needing to work with our partners to understand the local context around cooking. So, as an example, with Baobab, we sold two stoves, a fancier stove called the Jiko Malkia and a more economy stove called the Jiko Fresh. And the fancy stove is bigger, but even still, households were skeptical that it could cook their favorite dishes, their jollof rice and fish in one communal pot. So we had to run focus groups with would-be customers to and put big pots on to see whether our stove was meeting the mark. Similarly, our smaller stove, the Fresh, in some markets like Kenya, it can get marketed as a stove for cooking, but in Senegal, we put a teapot on top because tea culture is a very important part of daily life, and tea is the typical way of welcoming visitors into one's home. And we came to realize that the smaller stove was not going to work for cooking a wide range of dishes, but served at least a very specific use case around tea. Anyway, those are just some examples of like how focus groups and product testing have helped us to segment the model better for cooking at the country level.
Yeah, great. Sophie, can I invite you into this as well, like to talk about the barriers to innovation, and especially like, the examples that Ethan was sharing, there are costs associated with testing, right? Running focus groups, doing the pilots, there's so many costs involved. And there's also, you need to find the right methodologies to get the correct results. So integrity of the data. And so if you could touch upon some of those as well as to whatever answers you had prepared for us, that would be great.
Okay, thank you, Akita. I think I'll start off with, I think the barriers from a government perspective. I think when you're talking an innovation and you go and pitch an innovation to government, you tend to find resistance to understanding, or at least they're not as quick to come to the table and understand what it is you're pitching and how you expect them to support you. So for us, at least the time period when we were doing the R&D, we would often go at the beginning when we really didn't have the hardware to carry with us, we'd go in and you're pitching from a deck. Yeah. And when you think about a business model that is very different from from what they're used to seeing, a lot of them struggle to understand you're talking about where you're going to store the ethanol, you're talking about putting ethanol in an ATM, then you're talking about carbon credits, and so bringing too many innovations, I think at the same time proved confusing. So it unfortunately took quite a while before we were able to say that government was able to work with us. And that only started happening when we started hitting certain milestones. When you start talking about hundreds of thousands of households, now is when you actually see government is willing to open the door and have you sit in the room and discuss with them. I truly can't say that many of them can articulate what we are about, but now we are finding them more willing to listen to us. But again, it's about the fact what we've developed now. As we start talking about maybe venturing into rural, again, you're talking about a completely new pitch. Yeah, you're going to have to go and pitch to them and start talking about what adaptations are you going to make to rural and how do you get them to support you along the way. So I think government at the beginning usually does prove to be quite a challenge. And then, as we know, it takes a while for policy to be developed. I think unless something is having a huge negative impact on the population, to be honest, it does take a while. So as much as you would want your innovation included in policy, it takes either something radical or it gets to a point where they need to overhaul the policy. We are seeing quite a number of countries relooking at their energy policies. And in most cases, it's through support of various entities. I mean, like CCA, SC for All, IEA, International Energy Agency. So when they come in, and IRENA, so when they see that there is that gap, energy policy gaps, then they step in, and we see that policy development and policy updating happens a lot faster. Now, the other challenge I also want to speak to is about financing. Yeah, with each innovation, for us at the beginning, a lot of the support came from family offices. Now that we have a proven solution, we are looking at other alternatives. We are looking at VC. We are looking at debt. But when you think about the early stages, when you're developing the hardware, when you're testing, because you do need to start from 5 to 50 to 1,000. So for us, we got to a point where we identified a neighborhood where we recruited households, we recruited agents. And again, you have to build trust. A lot of these low-income households are not, they don't trust easily. To be honest, they've been burnt before. They've had situations where they've been used. They don't see the results of what they're being told to test. So it took a while for us just to build that trust, and then, be able to give them the hardware, be able to teach them, and be able to monitor. But again, that required us to be present, literally, to walk the street. It was not about recruiting external entities and telling them, go and recruit the customers. They needed to see our faces. As KOKO, they needed to see, if I have a problem, who do I reach out to? And that is part of the reason why we work very closely with shopkeepers, people who are already trusted. They're the ones we then recruit to become our customers. Now, when you think about testing, we launched with our version 6. So we needed to test 5 different versions of both the cook stove and the ATM. And all this required financing. Yeah. And then once we were ready to start construction, we manufactured the cook stoves ourselves. So we needed someone to fund us to build a factory for us to be able to produce this and to produce the KOKO Point. So there's usually a lot of financing required. So you can imagine how much time was being spent pitching. Now you get to a point where you need financing other than debt and equity. And that is where financing like grants, like what CCA provided, is able to enable us test some of these solutions, some of these innovations, before we are able to get to say now it is viable, it's a business, it's a viable business solution. And now you start looking for, for support to be able to scale it up. So financing is definitely a challenge. When you're talking about the households themselves, as we've alluded to, people are comfortable with what they're using, with what they've grown up using, either cooking on firewood or cooking on gas, or having gas as the gold standard. And suddenly you come in with this notion called clean cooking. A lot of us, when we either transitioned or we started using LPG, had no idea that this is called clean cooking. Most people were like, if I want to transition from using, charcoal or firewood, the next best option is LPG. Now you're then going to pitch people a solution that involves liquid fuel, and you're telling them, you use the cook stove just as you would your LPG one, but in terms of purchasing, the way you purchase is very different. For us, we sell in small quantities, because that is how households buy charcoal and how they bought, kerosene. So we adapted, and you said you want to buy enough for you to cook one day. You can actually buy enough to cook one day, whatever amount of money you earn that day. So it's just being able to overcome some of the issues, yeah, but you overcome those by actually showing, yeah, as Ethan alluded to in terms of demonstrating. You don't advertise something that is very innovative. You literally have to walk to someone either on the street or in their home and be able to show them. Yeah. So we had to recruit feet. It was feet on the street, walking from door to door. So for us, we literally recruited. We built household by household, which is you can imagine it's challenging. It has its own challenges when you're having people walk into a lot of these neighborhoods. But the results speak for themselves. The fact that people trust us, they were able to see, they're seeing as we are present there. If they face a challenge with the cook stove, we're able to dispatch someone within a matter of 24 to 48 hours to be able to resolve it. So it's being reachable, being accessible, and also being open with government. Yeah, as you said, when you're talking about pitching a solution to government, they want to be able to access where you are. They need to be able to come and see what are you doing in the field. So it's not only about us going and showcasing and talking very big to them. It's being able to have them come and visit facilities, take them to the field, and for them to actually see and talk to the users to see how it works. So right now we can speak to being a success. I mean, we have hit 1,000 employees. We are one of the larger employers around the world, around Kenya. But a 10-year journey. I think if we were to sit down and talk to companies that are innovating, that are considering entering this, would tell them, yes, it does pay off in the long term, but it will be challenging right from the start.
Great. No, thank you so much, Sophie, for that really comprehensive answer. I think between you and Ethan, we've identified so many of the challenges and also potential solutions to them, right? And really working with distributors who have feet on the ground, or in getting folks, shopkeepers, other influential members of communities, especially in rural areas where that social capital is such an important piece of their day-to-day lives. That was really interesting to hear as solutions. So I know Ethan has to leave at the top of the hour, so I just wanted to see if there is a question specifically for him. Otherwise, I want to turn to Simba, and then we'll do a Q&A, because this call does run for 75 minutes rather than a traditional 60-minute webinar. So I'm Ethan, I'm looking at the questions, and I think one of them maybe that you could speak to before you have to drop off is this question from Jennifer. It says, could you kindly speak on the overcrediting claims in the clean cooking sector? And I think all of you have alluded to it a little bit, especially around the issues around carbon financing, the VRM required, the fact that carbon financing has come, there are papers who have called out that, okay, there is something amiss over here.
Yeah, for sure. And I'm happy to stick around actually for a few more minutes.
Great.
Yeah. So firstly, I need to acknowledge that I am not BioLite's carbon finance expert, so I can do my best as a sort of educated lay person. My sense is that there certainly are what I guess I would call bad actors in the sector. There certainly are instances of significant overcrediting by certain projects, and I think it's really helpful that there's a reckoning there. Like we all need environmental integrity. A ton of carbon mitigated needs to equal a carbon credit, and not less than a ton of carbon mitigated. And there are projects that are crediting at like 12 tons a household, which doesn't pass any sort of sniff test from the empirical evidence around how impactful stoves are. For context, BioLite across the whole history of our business is crediting at below 3 tons a year, and this is a carbon business that we've been running for over a decade, and all the data is publicly available. So I think so. Yes, there are bad actors, and some of the aspects of "quote unquote" overcrediting are tied to what is not fully settled science. So there is new research out on FNRB values, which is a jargony way of talking about another jargony term, which is the fraction of non-renewable biomass, meaning how quickly do trees regrow in a particular area, which is a key input to the carbon methodology. There was some research that came out over the past year by Rob Bayless and his team, and that research is very different than previous research around FNRB values, and it has not been accepted yet by UNFCCC as being as being the new standard. And as we know with science, like you need lots of scientists studying a problem to reach consensus. So we have data points that point in a different direction to what settled science had been until a year ago. And some are saying that itself was an overstatement the other direction, and dropped crediting values too low. And so the scientists are going to duke this out over the coming years to hopefully arrive at a spot that gets us to a spot of environmental integrity. There's other conflicts of interest. There are folks on the board of the carbon accreditation bodies who work in industry, and like that shouldn't exist as an example. So there's a lot that needs to get cleaned up. There are a lot of skeletons in the closet, and I think it undermines the work that Sophie and I and Simba and others are doing, and hopefully so the reckoning is helpful, and I think there's a risk that it goes too far and undermines the justifiable carbon mitigation impact that clean cook stoves have. So hopefully we end up somewhere in the middle at the end of all of this. And most importantly, are putting environmental integrity at the forefront of the businesses that we're running.
Yeah, great. Thank you. And Simba, I'd like to bring you here also to answer the previous question, which was, what are the barriers to innovation? So we heard from Ethan, we heard from Sophie. They actually gave quite a comprehensive list, but we want to hear what you're seeing from and hearing from other companies that are not on our webinar today, but that you work with over 30 companies on the Venture Catalyst program itself. And then I also would like you to weave in this question that came in from, I cannot see the name of this person, but it talks about how do you structure contracting between companies and distributors where they can share the carbon financing, and even in other kinds of ways, right? How do you set up NDA structures? How do you set up contracting structures? Are those barriers to testing innovations, and some of those nitty-gritty things that maybe we don't always air on calls like this, but are very critical to actual operationalizing of innovations and pilots?
Yeah, thanks. Maybe I'll just start with the questions so I don't forget it. I think it's an interesting question around just structuring of the contracts, and part of the reason why we do what we do is to help iron out all of these things in the process, right? So when you start off with partnerships that are new in terms of distributors and manufacturers, whether that they're sharing revenue from the point of view of the split between the manufacturer and the distributor, or they're sharing carbon revenue from the point of view of the carbon asset developer versus the distributor. All of those things are not ironed out in the sector, and there's no kind of like standard templates or standard ways of doing business. So part of the work that we do is really working on an individual basis with companies that are trying to innovate new ways of doing things, and trying to see if we can have what we like to call like public goods that drop out of that sort of work, right? So how do we find out the best way of working between a distributor and a manufacturer, or what is an ideal split of carbon revenue that's fair to a distributor working in the coalface of distributing certain products? So that's part of the kind of the collateral that we like to leave in the sector for the work that we do, because of course we work from a point of view that we are not wedded to a particular technology. We're not even wedded to a particular fuel. We are wedded to the idea of universal access, right? So for all of the work that we do, what we're trying to do is grow the sector and grow ways that companies can contribute to how that's happening. On the point of the carbon, I think I agree with Ethan that there's two issues here. There's the scientific issue of just the technicality of how carbon assets have been developed in the past and what science has gone into that, and how the science has moved on in terms of the last few years and what we know now. And CCA is very much involved in trying to make sure that the new methodologies speak to the issues of the integrity of the science and make sure that all the latest thinking or all the latest scientific evidence is baked into the into the methodology, so we don't have an issue where there's questions about integrity. Because I think we can all agree that the worst thing that can happen is that the clean cooking sector gets labeled as being somewhere where a ton is not a ton, and there is a lack of trust between the mitigation effects or the good work that companies like BioLite and KOKO are doing in terms of producing clean cooking products and distributing them, selling them. So I think we all have to play a part in making sure that the integrity of this sector, regardless of the technology that's a use, the integrity of clean cooking is maintained and protected. To that end, I think so there's the issue of the science, but then I think there's also that issue around responsibility of the carbon project developers and responsibility of the other actors in the sector to behave in the right way, to not go out with the intention of wanting to overcredit or to get more benefit than they are due for the work that they're doing. It also speaks to issues like how to share revenue between manufacturers and distributors, and how to do that fairly. There are a lot of small distributors that we speak to or that come to us and tell us that they're not getting a fair share of, or they don't think that they're getting a fair share of the carbon revenue. They're doing a lot of work at the coalface and they don't think that that's fair and it looks fair. And all of that is in flux, right? Because this is new in the sector in terms of the impact it's having on clean cooking businesses. It's all new, and we're working all of that out. CCA is currently working on responsible carbon principles that will hopefully guide what we think is best practice in terms of carbon project development, and guide all the stakeholders that are working in this area around the best practice in how to do these things. So I just thought I'd add that into the conversation. In terms of our looking at what we see from an innovation and experimentation point of view, I think it's important to remember that there's companies working at different levels of the clean cooking value chain, and there are also a lot of companies that have got less capability in terms of being able to experiment, being able to try new things, fail fast, all of that sort of thing. I think if you took at the scale of the type of businesses that I interact with on a day-to-day basis, the KOKOs and the BioLites would be at kind of the top end of that in terms of their ability and the culture of innovation, their ability to experiment, their ability to try new things, put out new products, work with different partners. So part of what we do is work with the bigger players and help them to do that better and support them, and especially if they've got really innovative things that they want to try and experiment. And we think that's a good test case for catalytic grant capital, sometimes, to be able to allow companies to try something. It either works or it doesn't, but we want to learn the lessons and then iterate and try it again, or try it in a different context. So that's part of what we do. But it's also trying to help the smaller companies get into the culture of experimentation, the culture of innovation, which is not always easy if you're small, working from on a tight budget, etc. We've got recently launched a program, an initiative within the market strengthening work at CCA called that's basically an innovation challenge. And the first iteration or cohort of that was specifically focused on digital innovation. And that's talking to things like remote monitoring, sensors, and how you integrate that into existing technologies, and if that can play a role in improving the functionality of those tools, but also what we talked about before, like in terms of the carbon markets, like does that make it easier for you to do monitoring and evaluation of carbon projects if you've got the ability to remotely monitor, remotely understand how products are being used. Now, in that, there's a lot of issues. There's the technicalities of, does it actually work? Does the tech actually work? There's the cost. What does the cost add to? Like, so if someone comes to Ethan and says, can you stick one of these things on your stove? And he says, well, that doesn't really work for me on a pricing point of view. How do you, all of those things need to be figured out. And through the innovation challenges that we're going to be running, and as I say, this is the first iteration, we want to be able to provide relatively modest grants into the sector that allow companies that are working on really innovative technological pieces, for this first one, for example, to experiment quickly, work with partners, maybe like the BioLites and the KOKOs of the world, to say, if we've got this innovation, can this plug into what you're already doing? Does it add value? Does it not add value? And quickly be able to pivot and try something else. And we think that's another good use case for the type of funding that we can provide that really adds value to those type of players. But broadly speaking, I think the important thing is that there has to be a culture of innovation, a culture of experimentation, the ability to go into the market, test something, iterate, go back and test it again. And again, going back to this idea that user centricity has to be at the center of everything. We have to really understand what the user wants, what the user needs, and also not underplay the aspirations of the household. I think clean cooking perhaps historically was guilty of not really speaking to people wanting to have nice consumer durables in their kitchens to cook on. Some of the feedback that people give when they start using clean cooking solutions might surprise people, that people will talk about the ability to cook on something that doesn't leave their clothes smelling of smoke. Those type of less well thought of things are important in terms of identifying and speaking to the aspirations of the households. And ultimately, when you speak to those aspirations and challenges of the households, the products kind of will start to sell themselves, because those households then become advocates for the technologies that are out there. I think the points are made very much around cooking being contextual. So the environment that you work in, government regulation. Sophie will talk about excise duties on importing ethanol from different markets, or VAT restrictions that governments impose. Those are all very contextual in terms of where you are and what country you're working on. We do work in that area and try and speak to strategically how a government looks at clean cooking and how it integrates that. You might have seen some of the work that CCA is now going to be doing around delivery units, that looking at a specific country and trying to integrate the different components of policy within that country into one consolidated view of cooking, and hopefully using that as a way to make the path easier for companies working in those environments. So yeah, I'll stop there.
No, thank you so much for that. So I know we just have a minute left, but if you could briefly talk about some of the work that you're doing around innovative financing, and because there are a couple of questions around how do you get grants into the hands of early stage companies to allow for R&D and for innovation. Just maybe 30 seconds on that, if possible.
Yeah, cool. So I mean, the CCA, through our market strengthening work, I think the best place would be to jump onto our website. We've got different initiatives that we work on. So most of the funding that we have is initiative-led. So the innovation challenge is one bucket that I've spoken to. We've got what we're calling the financing platform, where we're trying to crowd in different types of investors into the clean cooking space, driven by the carbon market opportunity, and provide opportunities for investors to look at things like pre-financing, for example, so that we can provide money using carbon as collateral, the carbon asset as collateral for finances to provide money upfront for companies working on project development and on carbon project development. There's the User Insights Lab that I've already mentioned, that is partnering with various companies in the sector to work on very user-centric experimentation and projects around user centricity. And then we've also got an accelerator that we also run that will thematically look at different things. The first one that we're running, that we're managing at the moment, is West Africa based, again, based on carbon finance, looking at how we can assist smaller carbon project developers either to partner with existing carbon project opportunities or to structure their own carbon projects, and trying to maybe make that kind of murky world. We get a lot of feedback that says, it's difficult for a small player to understand what's happening and where to go, how to partner, how to structure their own projects, if they're the right place to structure their own projects, or if they should be looking at partnering. So we are working across all of those things. So the short answer to that is, depending on what you're working on, there's probably an initiative that you're more or less aligned to within the kind of market strengthening work that we do. And the best thing would be just to then reach out to us and see if there's an opportunity for technical assistance, grant funding, etc., based on those initiatives.
Great. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Ethan, Sophie, Simba. Thank you for answering everyone's questions, for sharing so transparently and so generously with all of us. And I apologize to all the attendees for on behalf of Burn Manufacturing and Sistema.bio. Burn had technical issues, and Sistema.bio, the speaker, had unforeseen circumstances that prevented her from joining. But thank you, everybody, and have a great rest of your day. Take care. And we will send out the recording. So yes, you'll have this. Thank you. Bye.
Thanks,
And
guys.
thank you, Yakuta. This would not have happened without you. So thank you for leading the charge.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you all. Bye.
Thank you. Enjoy the rest of your day.